Welcome to Goobertown Hobbies. My name is Brent. Today we have a collaboration with Guy and Penny at Midwinter Minis. They were kind enough to send me this jar of Marmite, this excellent Midwinter Minis t-shirt, and a challenge. I believe that there may be minis or a mini in here, and it's time to bust this open and see what we're doing today. So, get through this sharp Christmas paper here. Bits in the wrapping. Battletech strike team. Sweet. Okay, let's see what we have here. 4 minis already assembled and on bases. Giant mechs. Somehow, I've never been exposed to Battletech, but it's been around for a long time. Actually, it's the same franchise as MechWarrior. There's just so much to learn. I'm glad that Guy sent me this, because this isn't something that I would have thought to seek out for myself. So what am I gonna do with these guys? Giant robots could be a good candidate for airbrushing in fun colors, but I've been using my airbrush a lot recently, so maybe it'd be good to back off from that a bit. I looked at the box and the cards for some inspiration, and honestly, I was a bit surprised. As far as box art goes, this is pretty simple, especially for 2014. The paint job is fine, but if this were a Games Workshop product, it would be edge highlighted to infinity. Other companies would use some incredible non-metallic metal effects to jazz up these fighting machines. The bases on these might be the most shocking thing. If those are 30-foot tall mechs, how tall is that tuft of grass? How big is that sand? And while we're talking about scaling, the angle of the camera makes the figures kinda look small. As you can see, I just got really intrigued by the box art. I figured out what I'm gonna do with these figures. I'm going to try to replicate, or maybe even improve upon that box art in as little time as possible. The boss needs new Alpha Strike box art on her desk by 5 PM, so we better get cracking. I got some material together, and I got ready to knock out these 4 models in a single sitting. The box art looks to be tabletop standard. There's a little bit of highlighting, a little bit of shading, the viewports look decent, but yeah, it looks like it should be pretty straightforward. I'm not ragging on anyone's artistic skills here, I'm just intrigued at the choice the marketing team made. They're not using display quality minis, they're using tabletop quality minis. Maybe showing minis painted at an accessible level is actually a stroke of genius. Maybe not though. I decided no airbrush and no spray paint, we're going full brush work all the way through. The first step was to put down some base texture. I'm trying to use a nice fine grit texture here to establish the scale of these minis. As I'm working, I'm going to try to alternate between working on the base and working on the mechs to give everything time to dry. If that alternation isn't enough, I'll have a hairdryer handy to speed along the drying process. After the basing material, I switched to red Vallejo surface primer. Often red is a pretty translucent color, but I was happy to see that this primer had pretty good coverage. I hadn't worked with this bottle before, and it turned out to be a bit chunky, but we don't have time to worry about chunks. The boss needs box art on her desk by the end of business. I slapped that primer on as fast as I could with a pretty big brush. By the time I got the primer on, the base texture was still wet, so I took out that hairdryer and dried stuff off. This hairdryer step still took about a minute per mini, but that's definitely faster than waiting for things to set naturally. Once things were reasonably dry, I pulled out some Army Painter Dragon Red that looked closer to the shade that I was going for. I know 2 coats of paint is a bit of a luxury, but sometimes you just have to live a little. After the second coat of red paint, I decided to try painting the base. Hopefully that base texture is dry enough. I started with a German dark yellow surface primer from Vallejo. That base texture didn't come off while I was painting it, so I guess it was dry enough. I'm planning on putting another coat of paint on the base that's closer to the box art scheme here in a bit, but this was the closest primer color that I had, and I think it'll be a good base coat. Then I got out my hairdryer again, no time to wait. By the time I got the minis dry enough for the next steps, 42 minutes had elapsed. Not exactly a speed paint, but I am starting to get somewhere. I've decided that I'm going to do a lot of dry brushing in this project. Each of these mechs has a whole bunch of different armor panels. I can either paint each one separately, or I can do a whole lot of washing and dry brushing. I've got a cheap makeup brush here, and I'm trying to get the hang of using it as a dry brush. I had a couple of lighter, oranger shades of red from Army Painter that I wanted to try as highlights. Some people highlight red with orange, some highlight it with pink. You can also split the difference between orange and pink and use a flesh tone to highlight red. I've got a variety of options here on my desk. We'll find something that works. After I got bored of experimenting with this dry brushing, I started to paint on a few steel bits. I was using the box art as my guide for what gets to be metallic and what stays red. The plan is to hit the red parts and the steel parts with the same Null Oil wash in a little bit, so I wanted to get the steel color on now. Next, it was time to take a leap of faith and give the mechs an all-over black wash with Null Oil. The official paint scheme definitely seems to have black in between all of the armor panels. Maybe that artist took their time to pin wash each crack, but I'm gonna try to skip all that. An all-over wash with black can definitely be scary though. I'm expecting that these models will darken way up in tone and look a little bit dirty and beat up. I'm just hoping that they don't get too dark and too stained. At first glance, it was definitely looking pretty dark. I did my best to wick away as much of the Null Oil from the surface of the armor plates as I could, but I was worried. For the third and fourth model in the assembly line, I actually watered down the Null Oil to try to reduce the collateral staining a bit. This did seem to help, at least a bit. Anyway, I hope it all dries okay. As I was waiting for that black wash to dry, I switched to a brown wash and I hit the base texture with it. The official paint scheme has shades on the surface of the base that are both darker and lighter than the color of the base rim. In a little bit, once the Agrax Earth shade is dry, I can come back with a small dry brush and highlight the sand a bit. By now, the black wash was dry, and it did darken the models up more than I wanted it to. I got the dry brush back out. I knew that I would accidentally mess up the steel if I started dry brushing red again, but some things can't be helped. I experimented with a few shades of red, and in the end, I really liked the orangey Mars red from Army Painter. I used that as the dry brush color, and I gave each mech a pretty aggressive dry brush, trying to lighten them back up. We're playing fast and loose here. At this point, we're deep into the second hour of painting. I think I could have gone faster if I had a bit more experience with dry brushing, and a bit more experience with this makeup brush in particular. So my intent for this video was for it to be a bit of a speed paint the way that Guy does on his channel. I promised to let you know how long this paint job took me at the end, and it's not a bad time, but it's nowhere near the speed and quality that Guy gets on his channel. Midwinter Minis has a variety of mini painting content, but the quintessential videos on that channel are speed paint videos. Typically, Guy paints a mini, and there's a kitchen timer in the background of his shot. No sneaky editing tricks, just fast painting techniques and a skilled hand. There are a few unique and awesome features of the Midwinter Minis channel though. The most important is Penny. Guy and Penny are partners. Typically, Guy does the painting and they handle the voiceover as a team. And it actually works really, really well. I think that the world needs more couples who are tag team painting instructors. The paint tips are really good, the editing is very professional, and the voiceovers are fun and relaxing. One other mind-boggling thing about the Midwinter Minis channel is that a bunch of their speed painting content is from the Blackstone Fortress game. That core box and its expansions have a big variety of minis, so the speed paint videos are all unique and engaging. But at the same time, I'm in awe at how efficient and determined those two are. Stubborn even. Most of us have piles of unpainted minis. As one example, I painted that Primera Space Marine for my collaboration with Squidmar, and now I have the other 9 Marines from that box sitting in my cupboard unpainted. But Midwinter Minis has video proof that they paint every single model in a box before they move on to the next one. Now, maybe that's all an illusion. Maybe Guy and Penny have a pile of shame just like the rest of us. Maybe I missed the video where they discussed that. But ignorance is bliss. In my mind, they are the most efficient hobbyists in the world. In my mind, they own a reasonably sized trove of beautifully painted minis. Aside from that, they own just a few unpainted minis that they're gonna paint up for the next couple of episodes. Maybe that scenario I just described is physically impossible for us painters, but it sure is a lovely dream. That series where they crank through all the models in the Blackstone Fortress game is seriously inspiring. Not just because they get them all done, but because they have fun with each model in that box and they show off so many tricks and techniques. You should totally check it out. Okay, well I got bored of dry brushing, so I declared victory on those lazy red highlights. Then I moved on to fixing up the steel bits that I had accidentally dry brushed red. Then it seemed like a good time for another round of heavy gold brown on the base rims. At this point we are almost 2 hours in, but believe it or not, there's not too much left to do. I started to paint the viewports. They each got a base coat of light blue. Then they each got a dab of white as a bit of a reflection. That little dab of white is actually the only deliberate highlighting that I'm gonna do on these models. Everything else is just dry brushed. I'm planning on adding a blue wash over each viewport a bit later, so it's okay if there's too much contrast with that white reflection for now. Oh yeah, one of the bots has a gray radar dish thing on his head. I painted that dark gray as prescribed by the box. One of the other mechs has 2 green lights on the torso. I got those too. While I was waiting for the viewports to dry, I dry brushed the base texture with that gold brown. And then, very lightly, I highlighted the base even further with a dusting of pure white. The base is actually starting to look pretty good. It's the same as the box art thematically, but I think it looks much better, and it's definitely scaled more appropriately. Time to wash those viewports. This is a nice bright blue wash from the secret weapon. That's going to give a bit of variation to the glass and make those reflective glints look more natural. It's also super easy to do. Okay, once more around the base rim ought to do it. Finally, just a teeny bit of freehand. The box art has some swords on a few armor plates. I did what I could to replicate those using light gray paint. What I drew isn't much more than a lopsided cross, but that actually kind of works. There was also some sort of a circular arrow marking that I couldn't quite make out on a few shoulders. I did what I could. These weren't very good replicas, but it gets the idea across just fine. I knew I wasn't going to put grass tufts on the bases. That totally messes with the scale. Even small flock wouldn't look right, so I painted green splotches onto the textured base. If these mechs are 30 feet tall, then tiny clumps of grass need to look truly tiny. I'm happy to say that I think it worked. One last step. For the fun of it, I dabbed on a bit of pale yellow pigment powder onto the bases and onto the robot feet. I'm freestyling here, but I think it adds a nice touch. Okay, done. Time for a snack. Guy and Penny sent along this Marmite. Marmite. Okay, that's enough Marmite. Let's see how we did. Here we are after 2 hours and 31 minutes. I'm not going to hold on these rotating shots for too long. Honestly, I don't even care about the backside of these mechs. I just care that we can arrange them into some decent box art. So recently, Goobertown videos have taken me longer and longer as I've been trying to one-up myself. I normally hunt for awesome paint schemes and try to put a lot of effort into highlighting and details and all that. This video was a complete vacation for me, doing a slapdash job according to box art. A super simple base coat with a wash of Nuln Oil and a bit of dry brushing. Obviously, these models are not my best work, and I assure you that they were not meant to be. but once I called them done and took them off their painting handles, I actually liked the look of them. Not display pieces, but they actually sort of look like giant fighting machines. They look like a cohesive team, and the paint scheme from the box really isn't bad. They look at least as good as pre-painted minis from most companies out there, and it took very little time and very little concentration to get there. But now is the moment of truth. Let's make some box art. I lined them up with a white poster board in the background. I lit them pretty harshly from above so that the picture would look like the models have sharper highlights than they really do. I mean, I did dry brush generally from top to bottom, but that didn't work any miracles for me. I experimented with a couple of different camera angles. I want the mechs to look big, so shooting from a low angle should assist with that. Let's look at the box art again. Those mechs don't look big. Mine are gonna look big. Okay, I have a few pictures that I like. I'm going to replace the background with a desert scene. My father likes photography, so I asked him nicely to go take some photos of the Arizona desert. While he was doing that, I did some photo editing. Now, some people might use Photoshop, but I don't have Photoshop. I have Paint.net, the champagne of lightweight photo editing freeware. That magic wand selection tool can do a ton of work, and I can do the rest with this handy eraser tool. Save as a .gif, and we're in business. Once Father returned from the desert, I imported my files into my other favorite bit of editing software, PowerPoint. Then I just moved things around until we have some decent box art. And it's not bad. Catalyst Games, let me know if you ever need me to crank out some box art in an afternoon. Joking aside, if anyone involved in making this box is watching, it really is charming. I do like the accessible paint scheme, and I like the boldness of that choice. I had fun painting these, and I really do think that they look good enough to put them on the table and play some really fun games. And to Guy and Penny, thank you so much for doing this collaboration with me. This was a great change from the models that I usually paint. Now, of course, I sent a challenge across the pond to Midwinter Minis. Guy gave me just a hint of what they're doing with it, and I am excited. It sounds like it'll be a departure from their usual fare, while still highlighting the things that makes that team so much fun to watch. So go check out Midwinter Minis and see what I sent them. If you're coming over to Goobertown from Midwinter Minis, well, thank you so much for checking this out. If you liked this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, tell a friend, all that good stuff. If you need more Goobertown hobbies in your life, I'll leave links to the Patreon campaign and my Instagram page. Okay, that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching.